Hi everyone. This is going to be my first of hopefully many chess videos. I'm a math professor. I love to teach, and I found out over the years that when I teach something, I learn it better. So I'm making this YouTube channel in order to learn chess. If you want to learn along with me, that'd be fine. I play on Lee Chess. My blitz rating has been as high as about 2100, and my rapid rating has been as high as about 2200. So these videos are not for the very strong chess player, but if your rating is somewhere, let's say between 1000 and 2000, then this might be a good channel for you. Okay, in the first video, I decided I'm going to play through a famous chess game called the Opera game. And I decided to memorize this game because Grandmaster Ben Feingold told me to. So the Opera game was played in 1858, and white was played by Paul Morphy, the American chess master. Black was a couple of strong amateurs, and it was played in Paris in an opera house, and that's why it's been called the Opera game. And the game began with the king's pawn opening, and black decided to play Philidor defense here with d6. I think that's a bit passive. I wouldn't play that move. I'd either play knight c6 to develop a piece, or maybe I'd play the Petrov, knight f6 there. Okay, but the Philidor defense is something I face sometimes as white, and I like to play d4, which is the move Morphy played. And in this game, black played something that looks a little strange to me today, bishop g4, pinning the knight here. Okay, I think a more normal move in this position that you would face more often is taking the d-pawn. And from here, it turns out white can do pretty well by recapturing with either the knight or the queen. I think a lot of people would recapture with the knight. Then black might develop the king side quickly, attack e4, white can protect it. Okay, black can move the bishop out. And now white can develop this bishop on f1 as a possibility. Some people actually fianchetto it. Some people might move it to c4. I don't like to move it to c4. I'd have to analyze this central fork trick, as it's called. Maybe it's good, I don't know. But I prefer to put my bishop on e2 here, which adds some extra defense of the g4 square, which might come in handy later, like if I put a bishop on e3 and I don't want it to get kicked away by a knight. So I like to put the bishop on e2. Then maybe black castles, white castles. And I like this position as white because white has a little more space. The pawn on e4 is more advanced than black's central pawn on d6. So that affords white a little more space. It's pretty easy to play. I've also played the other capture from time to time, queen takes d4. If I do that, I have to be willing to give up the bishop pair because often my opponents will try to gain time on my queen with knight c6, in which case I like to keep the queen in the center and pin the knight. It's a pretty standard way to play. Black usually unpins. And then you can trade your bishop for the knight, keeping the queen in the center. And you can develop your queenside very quickly here. Maybe you can pin that knight. Black would unpin it. And you can castle queenside, getting that rook on an open file immediately. So this position is also pretty good for white, easy to play because of the extra space here in the center. But this isn't how the game went at all. Okay, instead of capturing on d4, black played bishop g4, pinning the knight. Okay, and Morphy decides to take the pawn on e5. I think that's the best move. And before recapturing that pawn, black throws in this in-between move, bishop takes f3. That's necessary because if black takes that pawn, white would trade queens and win a pawn here. And black lost his castling rights. So backing up, black should throw in this in-between move first, and Morphy recaptured with his queen. Although I will point out that you can get a great position by recapturing with your g-pawn, because if black doesn't want to stay a pawn down, he'll recapture on e5, and then you can trade queens here and spoil black's castling rights again. And you can even follow it up with, let's say, f4 here to trade your f-pawn for that e-pawn and relieve yourself of the doubled pawns. And white's doing really well. Okay, but Morphy doesn't like to play like that. He likes to keep the queens on the board and develop quickly, play for the initiative. And this game, by the way, is going to be a master class in quick development. Okay, watch how Morphy's pieces start to swarm out while black's pieces stay at home. So Morphy captures with the queen, and then black recaptures on e5. And white develops the bishop with tempo. There's a mate threat here on f7 that black has to guard against. There's a few ways to do it. Black chose to do it with knight f6, blocking access to f7 here from the white queen. But it turns out that's not the best way to protect against that mate. And the reason is this pawn on f7 is still pretty weak. It's only guarded by the king. And black has another weakness in the position, which is here on b7. And Morphy's next move is going to take advantage of both of those weaknesses at the same time. So instead of knight to f6, I think black should protect f7 with his queen, like maybe queen f6 or queen d7. And that way the pawn on f7 is guarded twice here. And so black only has that one weakness to defend. All right, but black played knight f6. And right here, maybe you want to pause the video. Try to find the move that Morphy played that takes advantage of both of those weaknesses. Okay, Morphy played queen b3. So that hits the pawn on b7, and there's this battery here on f7. And black can't protect both weaknesses. But black really has to protect f7. He doesn't want to face bishop takes f7 check and then have to move his king. So black decided to play queen to e7 here, which looks a little strange. You may wonder, why is black blocking in the bishop here and not playing the queen to d7? Well, we'll see why in a second, why black plays queen to e7 here. After queen e7, Morphy played knight to c3, developing yet another piece and protecting this pawn on e4, which was under attack. Morphy could have played, though, another strong move. Could have played queen takes b7, hitting the rook in the corner. But if Morphy did that, black's plan was to play queen to b4 check. Okay, so we've got this fork here. So that forces Morphy to trade queens. And then maybe c3 or bishop d2. And this position is, of course, very good for white because, for one thing, white's up a pawn. So Morphy could have played like that. But it's not really his style, I suppose, to just grab a pawn and play the endgame. So he didn't want to trade queens, in other words. He wanted to keep the queen on the board. And let me go back and explain why queen to d7 is different than queen to e7. Well, after queen to d7, white probably should play queen takes b7 in this case, because black doesn't have that option of playing queen to b4, forcing the trade of queens. And so black's going to lose that rook in the corner there. For example, black can't guard the rook with the queen here because of the move bishop b5, winning the queen. So that's why black did play queen to e7. Morphy continued to develop, protecting e4. And then black took the opportunity here to protect his weakness by playing c6. So the queen now guards that pawn on b7. Okay, Morphy continues his relentless development, perfect harmony of his pieces, pinning the knight on f6, getting ready to castle. And black's pieces are terrible. I mean, this bishop can't move, the rook can't move, the king's still stuck in the center. Look at all these pieces on the original squares. Okay, after Morphy played bishop to g5 here, black makes a terrible blunder. Not that black has a great game anyway, but black played b5, attacking the bishop. Might look good superficially. Maybe you're driving the bishop off of this strong diagonal, but not really, because Morphy's got knight takes b5, sacking a piece here. Black takes the piece, Morphy takes the pawn, check. And there's really only one way to get out of the check here. You don't want to move your king to the central file where a rook is going to show up. So you're going to have to play knight from b to d7. Okay, and after that, Morphy castles long. Castling long sometimes has the great benefit of placing a rook on a central open file, so it's already doing its job. Doesn't take another move. If you castle short, you would have had a rook on f1 here, and you'd have to take another move to get it over to the central file. So just take a look at this position for a minute. Morphy sacked a piece for 2 pawns, so black's got a slight material edge, but who would you rather be? Would you rather be white with this piece bearing down on this knight? This knight is pinned, this bishop is bearing down on it, this bishop is pinning the other knight to the queen, this queen is still eyeing these central squares and this f7 weakness here, and black's pieces on the king's side can't move, and his king is stuck in the center. So even without further analysis, it's an easy call. White is definitely winning in this game. Anyway, after white castles, he's hitting this knight on d7 twice. He's threatening to capture it, and that knight's not guarding it because it's pinned. And black doesn't want to lose his queen, so he's forced to move the rook here to guard that knight. Okay, now Morphy decides to exchange a piece here on d7. He's got 2 ways to do it. Bishop takes d7 or rook takes d7. Which way would you capture? Okay, a lot of beginning players are told that when you're about to start a capturing sequence, to start with your piece of the least value, which in this case is the bishop. Don't lead with your heavy piece, which you don't want to get taken. Lead with the small piece, so your smaller piece gets taken. But in this case, it's actually better to take with the rook. And the reason is, after recapturing, this bishop is still doing its job of pinning the piece on d7. Not to mention, white can recapture the rook at any time and get the exchange back anyway. So it's not really an exchange sacrifice. Okay, so after that move, Morphy gets his last piece into the game. Rook to d1. Okay, not only is every piece into the game, but every piece is pointed perfectly into black's position here. You've got a couple pieces hitting d7, you've got a bishop pointed at the queen, pinning the knight. This queen is not only doing a good job on this diagonal, but imagine this bishop moves. Well, then the queen's got that back rank check as well. Everything's perfect. Okay. So after rook to d1, black's got no defense. Black has no defense at all. But he tries something. Plays queen to e6. And maybe telling Morphy to trade queens here. But the real purpose of queen to e6 is to relieve the pin on this knight. So the knight now is protecting the rook. Okay. However, Morphy saw all this coming, and he plays bishop takes d7 check, forking the king and queen. So you have no choice here. Black's got to capture that bishop with the knight. It's kind of funny, though, that capturing the bishop with the knight is actually the fastest way to lose the game, because Morphy has a beautiful two-move checkmate at this point. Maybe pause the video and see if you can find it. Mate in two. Okay, so Morphy played queen to b8 check. There's no way to move the king. The only legal move is knight captures, and then the checkmating move is rook to d8 mate. Great checkmate with the bishop and rook. Okay, so Morphy sacked a lot of material there, but it was all forced. He had it all under control. Black's king never moved off of its original square. It's a beautiful game. It's a great one to learn, and it was really easy to memorize too, since there's meaning behind all the moves, and it's pretty easy to follow. All right, thanks for watching my first chess video.